the disappearance of 10-month-old baby Lisa Irwin. She was taken from her Kansas City home in October of 2011. Her mother was 27-year-old Deborah Bradley. Her father was 29-year-old Jeremy Irwin, and each of them had brought an existing child into the relationship. Together, they welcomed their daughter Lisa into the world on November 11th, 2010. Jeremy was an electrician, and on October 3rd, 2011, he worked during the day, but that evening, Jeremy had to go to work again because it was the first day of a new job, and this new job was remodeling a local Starbucks. Now, he knew he was going to be working late, but he felt that he would be back around 11 that evening. According to Deborah, she was busy also that evening getting her kids fed and ready for bed. She put 10-month-old Lisa to bed at around 6:40 in the evening, and at that time, her next-door neighbor, a woman named Samantha Brando, stopped over. The older kids were settled in the living room watching a movie. The baby was asleep. There was no immediate concerns that needed Deborah's attention, so she could have a couple glasses of wine. Shortly before this, Deborah had peeked into Lisa's room to check on her, and she'd found the baby standing up in her crib. And this would be the last time that Deborah saw her daughter. So Deborah and her neighbor Samantha, they're sitting outside, and at around 7:30 that evening, a teenager named Shane, he was outside his grandmother's house smoking a when Deborah and Samantha called him over to talk. He walked over and they all chatted for about an hour and a half before he went back home. Shane claimed that he could tell that they had been because of the way they were acting. A little after 10, Deborah told Samantha that she was going in for the night, so Samantha and her daughter went home, and Deborah and the boys went to bed. Now, Samantha claims that at this time she saw the lights in Deborah's house turn off. Several hours later, at 3:45 in the morning, a tired Jeremy arrived back home. He'd been working much later than he'd expected, and he was annoyed to find the front door of his house unlocked and all the lights blazing inside. As he was walking through the house, turning the lights off, Jeremy noticed that there was a window open in the computer room, and when he went over to close it, he noticed that the screen had been pushed in. When he opened the door to baby Lisa's room, she was not in her crib. Puzzled, Jeremy returned to his bedroom and woke Deborah up, asking her where the baby was. At that point, chaos ensued. Jeremy and Deborah began searching all over the house for Lisa, but baby Lisa was nowhere to be found. Apparently, this family had 3 cell phones. Jeremy's personal phone, Deborah's personal phone, which at that time was broken and not working, and another phone that Deborah's grandfather had given her to use until her phone was fixed and working. And these phones were always in the same place. But when Jeremy went to grab his, all 3 phones were missing. Luckily, Jeremy did have his work cell phone on him, and he was able to call the police, telling the 911 operator that he'd just gotten home to find his daughter missing, and what he noticed was that the window of his computer room had been tampered with. Jeremy and Deborah said that they often left windows open in the house. What was odd was that the screen was tampered with. By 4:10 in the morning, police had arrived at the house. An Amber Alert was sent out for Lisa, and the investigation began. Strangely enough, however, the Amber Alert was canceled the next day, October 4th. Usually for an Amber Alert to be issued, authorities need some sort of descriptive characteristics of the person suspected of taking a child. So it's possible that because they didn't have this information, the police felt the Amber Alert would not be helpful. Another theory is that this Amber Alert was canceled due to the fact that the police did not believe Lisa had been abducted. According to Deborah Bradley, from the moment they questioned her, police were accusing her of being responsible for whatever had happened to baby Lisa.
It turned into, you did it, look at your baby, and do what's right for her, and just tell everybody where she is so she can come home.
Deborah was interrogated for that first time for 12 hours, and she volunteered to take a polygraph test to prove that she was telling the truth. Once the test was finished, the FBI agent, he looked at her and he said, I think you're a terrible mother, and you failed the test, so we know you're lying. The police kept hammering on her and used her failed polygraph to attempt to get a confession from her. But she was worried that if they were so sure that she was responsible, the police wouldn't be out there looking for her daughter. They wouldn't be exploring other avenues.
Our focus is Lisa, is our Lisa coming home to be with us where she belongs.
Now, there are many sources that say Deborah did not fail her polygraph test, including her lawyer. He said on national television that she had not failed her polygraph test, that she'd been lied to, and the police did not discount this statement, so they didn't challenge it. The general belief is that the police lied to her, said she failed so that they could extract a confession, and legally, the police are allowed to do this. So after this interview, the relationship between the police and baby Lisa's parents became a little bit strained. On October 6th, Jeremy and Deborah gave a press conference begging for the safe return of their daughter. Early on in the day, the Kansas City police chief, Steve Young, said Deborah and Jeremy were cooperating. But later that night, he said they no longer were cooperating. Another issue was that Deborah Bradley had changed her story a little bit. When Lisa had first gone missing, Deborah claimed that she'd put Lisa to bed at around 10 in the evening, but when she was interrogated by the police, Deborah admitted that baby Lisa had been put to bed much earlier, at around 6:40 in the evening, and she couldn't remember if she'd checked on her before going to bed herself. Her story of how much she'd consumed that evening also changed. Deborah admitted that she'd had substantially more. She did say she was drunk. But there is some evidence to the intruder theory, and there's a figure at the center of this theory that definitely needs to be discussed. His name is John Tanko, but he was known around the area simply as Jersey. And on October 3rd, the same day that baby Lisa was killed, Jersey was staying in the home of a family who lived in the Irwin's neighborhood. This family had a next-door neighbor, Mary Hurt, and Mary was familiar with Jersey because he did odd jobs for this family. This family happened to be out of town on this day, and Jersey was staying at their house while they were gone to tend to their yard, to turn the sprinklers on and off, and, just keep a watch on things. Mary said that Jersey was around a lot. She'd also seen and spoken to Jersey's girlfriend, a woman named Megan Wright. Earlier in the day on October 3rd, Mary had seen Jersey at her neighbor's house at about 1 p.m. He was doing yard work at this time. Mary got home at around 9:30 that evening, and she noticed that her neighbor's sprinklers were still on, but when she stepped outside a few hours later, at around 11 p.m., the sprinklers had been turned off, so Mary just assumed he'd been the one to turn them off. At around 11:30 that same evening, a man was leaving for work in this same neighborhood when he saw something that made him do a double take. He saw a man walking in the road carrying a baby who was not dressed for the weather. At 2:30 a.m., just a few hours later, a clerk working at a gas station on the corner of North Brighton and Parvin Road witnessed a man walking out of the woods wearing what looked to be a white shirt. Not long before this, a dumpster fire was reported to the police at 2:27 a.m. Now, here's what's important about this fire. First, it was located in the parking lot of the same condo complex that Megan Wright lived in. And interestingly enough, just the month before this, Megan's car had been set on fire in the same parking lot, and the dumpster fire was not far from where the man would be seen walking out of the woods. Not long after, at roughly 4:10 a.m., a man named Mike Thompson was driving his motorcycle on his way home when he saw something strange. He was at an intersection about 3 miles from the Irwin home where baby Lisa was taken when he saw a man wearing a t-shirt carrying a baby. Thompson said, quote, "It's 4 a.m., 45 degrees, baby don't have a coat or nothing, and this guy's walking down the street, and I thought it was kind of weird." When baby Lisa was put to bed that night, her mother had dressed her in purple shorts and a purple t-shirt with cats on it. But all the eyewitnesses who saw this man carrying a baby claimed that the baby was not dressed and appeared to be just wearing a diaper. When police arrived to put the fire out and to investigate, they found the burnt remains of baby clothes in the dumpster. It's also reported that John Jersey Tanko was really into setting fires. Additionally, at around 12:15, the morning that baby Lisa was taken, a neighbor saw a man walking through one of the yards. And this was the same yard that both Jersey and Megan were known to cut through often on their way to Megan's townhouse. And right at the edge of that yard was that dumpster, the one that someone had lit a fire in, the one that had burnt baby clothes in it. Remember, the Irwins had 3 cell phones that they'd found missing from their kitchen counter. At 11:57 p.m., someone made a call from one of those phones, a call that lasted roughly 50 seconds. And the number that this phone called was the cell phone of Megan Wright. Megan told police that she was not the one who'd gotten the call. She lived with 7 other people, and her cell phone was the only one in the home, so they all used it. Megan believes that when this call came in, her phone was in the possession of a man named Dane Greathouse, also known as DJ Diggler. Private investigator Rugen also revealed that he had gained access to Mary Wright's phone records, and he claimed that he'd discovered that call had never gone through, that even though it had been placed from the stolen phone, it never reached Mary's phone. According to Deborah and Jeremy, they aren't even sure how a call would have been placed because their cell service had been disrupted due to non-payment of their bill. But we do have confirmation from police that Megan Wright's number was dialed from one of the stolen cell phones that night. We do now have a concrete connection to John Jersey Tanko. The call to Megan was placed just before midnight. That means that someone went into that house before midnight to take those phones, and possibly baby Lisa as well, which adds up with the time that the neighbors saw a man walking around with a baby in the neighborhood, as well as the time after 11 p.m. when Mary Hurt noticed that her neighbor's sprinklers had been turned off, meaning that Jersey Tanko was in the neighborhood at that time of night. And it cannot be a coincidence that the number called from the stolen cell phone was the number of Jersey's ex-girlfriend. Megan Wright also revealed that before she and Jersey had broken up, she'd told him she wanted to become a mother. Is it possible that Jersey, in an effort to win Megan back, had stolen a baby to give to her? Now, 5 months after Lisa went missing, John Jersey Tanko was arrested and charged with vehicle tampering. But here's the oddest thing. Although police questioned Jersey in relation to baby Lisa's disappearance, they claimed he was very cooperative and that he's never been considered a suspect in her case. Apparently, he had an alibi, and I'm not sure what that alibi could have been that could be proven because this man didn't have a cell phone, so you wouldn't be able to prove with GPS coordinates that he was where he said he was. Also, apparently, the police showed the eyewitnesses pictures of Jersey Tanko, and they asked, is this the same man that you've seen carrying a baby? And out of the 4 of them, only one witness confirmed. On October 12th, private investigator Bill Stanton arrived in Kansas City. Stanton was a licensed private investigator in the state of New York. He also said that he'd been sent there by a wealthy benefactor from out of the state. Bill says he's going to follow the evidence no matter where it takes them. And on October 14th, Bill Stanton announced that this same wealthy benefactor who'd sent him there was also offering a $100,000 reward for the safe return of baby Lisa Irwin, or at least for information that would lead to the capture of her abductor. And while all of this is going on, the Kansas City police are still searching for any sign of baby Lisa. It was literally as if she'd disappeared without a trace. On October 18th, Deborah and Jeremy hired or retained a lawyer, and this is a man that the New York Post claimed was probably the most hated lawyer in New York. Joe Tacopina is a well-known and high-profile criminal defense attorney, and he's been very successful with it. So it was obviously jarring to a lot of people when this man was hired by the parents of a missing baby. And many people wondered who was paying him. He was not cheap. I tend to believe it was this same wealthy benefactor that had sent Wild Bill to Missouri, right? Bill, the private investigator, was from New York. Joe Tacopina was from New York. This wealthy benefactor was from out of state, probably also from New York. On October 19th, due to Deborah's changing story, police were able to get a warrant for the Irwin home and yard. Now, the original search that they'd done initially in the days following Lisa's disappearance, it had focused mainly on baby Lisa's room and then possible points of entry. And the police made it sound as if that initial search had been restricted by the family of baby Lisa, because the warrant for the new search claimed, quote, the extent of the search had been limited in nature with consent. A more extensive and intrusive search needs to be completed. This time they were doing it without the consent of Deborah and Jeremy, and they brought in a full forensics team, including a cadaver dog, and this dog signaled in an area of the master bedroom next to Deborah and Jeremy's bed. In addition to this, the police found a garden area in the backyard with portions of dirt that appeared to have been recently disturbed or turned over. Joe Tacopina claimed that he found the report meaningless since these dogs are trained to detect decomposing flesh, and even if baby Lisa had it in that house, decomposition could not have possibly happened so quickly. The body doesn't start to decompose until 24 to 72 hours after. So after this, baby Lisa's case went cold for quite some time until 2 years later. In 2013, a small, blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl was found during a drug raid in a Romani camp in Greece. In the end, however, the ages did not match up. Maria was 4 years old and baby Lisa would have been only 3. So let's discuss this from all angles. Is it possible that Deborah Bradley took the life of her own daughter and then covered it up? Honestly, looking at them both and listening to them cry and talk about their daughter, I don't feel that either of them were involved in anything happening to that baby. John Jersey Tanko seems like a much more plausible suspect, and if there's one thing that surprises me, it's the fact that the police have claimed he's never even been a suspect, but I am going to hand it off to you. And I will see you very soon. Stay kind, stay beautiful. Bye.